And good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, McDuff Lives 3. And tonight we are back with David Cranmer Underdown to have a very interesting discussion over what's been going on this week and the past 2 weeks since we've gotten together. But, before we get started, we just send out our heartfelt condolences to Mark Kulak and his family for a loss they've suffered over the weekend. And for that reason, Mark will not be with us tonight. However, he'll be back with us very soon. And those of you that know Mark know this is a very sad, indeed, event. And I won't go into it further, just out of interest of privacy, but just to say, wow, we really feel for you, Mark and family. All right. So David Cranmer Underdown, thanks so much for being with us tonight. And how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks, John. I just wanted to say to Mark that, I've been so learned so much from him on his show, and that I feel like, even though I've never met him, I feel like I've really connected with him. So I just, wanted to say that my, condolences go to him and his family right now, and I am thinking about him, and just wanted to know that I know it's just a hard time.
Yeah. Well, everything's changing so fast right now, David. I'm just my head's spinning. I'm one of those people that have tried really, really hard to ignore Elon Musk. I
Mhm.
I didn't want to know all of that stuff. It's
Yeah.
oh no, 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 please don't tell me about the Starlink and the brain thing and the Neuralink, and I don't no. Let's just all just forget about that and get back to watching television. And I mean, even watching television would be better than living in a world where these crazy technological mind control freaks are in charge. Um, but now I have to learn about him because he's the guarantor of my freedom of speech, apparently. This just it keeps resonating with me. But I don't know if you've ever heard me do my speech about or my rant on Isaac Asimov's foundation, but the whole idea of that very important science fiction book is that there's this group of really, really smart people. They're called psychohistorians.
Hmm.
They understand how history is shaped by mass psychology. And because they're really so good at this, they figured out that for mankind to progress significantly, it would take about 1 million years. But they don't think 1 million years is a good way to is the best that they can do. And as a matter of fact, they figured out a way that they can do it in only 1,000 years. And this is the Harry Seldon plan.
Hmm.
And Harry Seldon is this guru guy from the beginning of this plan. So Harry Seldon's plan is basically that everything gets farmed out to these traders, these people called traders, and the traders go around and they just do whatever they need to do and and the system is built on the presumption that the best way to move things quickly is a whole bunch of oligarchs. And I'm telling you, that's what's going on. We're getting everything is turning into like your oligarch can beat my oligarch. My oligarchs can beat your oligarchs. Uh, this is can Elon Musk and Bill Gates together beat Kolomoisky and the player to be named later? Uh, okay, help.
Well, I actually, I've never read Asimov, but in my high school we did have a class that was called Modern Themes in Literature, which focused on science fiction books. So we did, read the Huxleys and the Orwells, and some of the better known books. And I have to say, I never connected with them. I liked the Star Wars movies. Those were kind of the first big blockbuster movies that came out when I was a little kid. So I would watch those. But it is interesting going back and sort of looking at how they put ideas or plant these concepts in in literature and in film and different ways. um, I think that's absolutely true. One of the connections that is fascinating to me is the Brave New World, Fordlandia, which was Henry Ford's attempt at a rubber plantation in Brazil, which I always think of Amazon being sort of a tip of the cap to the Amazon rainforest with Jeff Bezos. So I always wonder if there's sort of a an old family link there. But that was always interesting to me, that Fordlandia was, and Henry Ford was such a key figure in the Brave New World. And then of course with his brother Julian Huxley being a thought leader and somebody that was with Yunsenko, the United Nations, and then also one of the founding fathers of the World Wildlife Fund. So these families do have positions of great influence. So I think it is, it's interesting to look at it and sort of analyze different characters.
Well, I do want to just bring home a point that I made for the first time a few months ago when I was deeply studying the Fabian Society, and you remember that, and how they have the London School of Economics,
Mm-hmm.
and they created the London School of Economics, and this is the kind of like the big think tank for how they keep control of the economy of the world. And it's kind of divided into two camps: the Keynesians and the Hayeks. And the Keynesians are the the liberal, Hillary Clinton type, Robert Reich Keynesians, and then the Hayeks are the cutthroat, don't give the peasants anything, and just keep on looting everything to your benefit. And somewhere in between those two, they were able to control the economy of the world by just fighting between each other. That hair pulling thing that George Webb talks about is set up, in the LSE. But also, which I just have to bring this point home, is that two of their economists that wrote about this entire scheme were named Harris and Selden.
Mm-hmm.
And in Asimov's book, he names the guy that writes the psychohistory, Harry Selden. I think that's absolutely a giveaway that, yes, these science fiction writers like Asimov are predictive programming us to believe stuff, and then but they leave these little clues in there, like so anybody that's the head honcho at the LSE is going to understand. Oh, well, this is a reference to what we're doing, nod, wink, wink,
Right.
which it is. So I just once we got down that road, I just had to make that point again. I think it's just fascinating. Somebody ought to write a dissertation on the connection between Asimov and the London School of Economics.
And even to take it back a little bit further, Fletcher Prouty talks about how the Halliburton College, which was the East India College, their economists were, Thomas Malthus, and I don't think Adam Smith was in there, but John Locke certainly was. So, some of these real, huge figures in economic theory, it does come from the colonists. The East India Company, which was modeled after the Dutch West India Company, and sort of this idea of organizing a society and using commerce and labor and studying how to get productivity out of a society. I mean, I feel like you and Harley get into those kind of ideas as far as economic policy.
Yes, and it was interesting to discuss with Harley a little bit about economic policy yesterday morning on the show, and I ran into a point where I found myself having to head for the books, and that was when he was critical of Jackson's opposition to the Second Bank of the United States.
Hmm.
And I had always kind of taken it as, and the other part was when we talked about the 1907 Teddy Roosevelt
Right.
financial deal with J.P. Morgan,
Hmm.
and maybe that one is more is more current today, because I made I kind of made the assumption that everybody would agree with Stephen Kinzer from the interview I had made reference to, in which he said, that this whole American empire began with the financial panic of 1907, and Teddy Roosevelt using tax money, giving like $25 million worth of tax money. It's just handing it to J.P. Morgan, who then had made a deal with all the major banks that they would get their cut of it, and by giving from the government, giving that money, that allowed those banks to stay afloat, which then kept the economy itself from crashing, which one would say, well, that's a good thing. Yeah, I'm glad that the economy didn't crash, because it would have been horrible.
Right.
But on the other hand, that's just like we talk about with everything else. All of the examples we have of losing our rights by the losing because of the Patriot Act, or just every time they get a chance to, they take something away from us. And now we're losing the value of our currency to inflation, for example. And what can we do about that? But the idea of taking American government money, subsidizing the banks, came along at the same time as using American money to finance wars in the third world, in first, Hawaii with Robert Lansing, then with in the Philippines, and that horrible war that nobody really remembers now. But it was a war of conquest, a war of terrorism on our side, on our part, and a war of almost genocidal cruelty. And we did that at the same time that we were waving the flag, saying we're bringing liberty uh, and freedom to you. So you should be grateful. That era, um, Teddy Roosevelt's era, is something we haven't talked about much,
Right.
but we really should. We should spend more time on it. So I did follow up and get the book. I just got it in the mail today, and look forward to reading it. I'll probably do a whole show on this book. Um, I have a love-hate relationship with Kinzer. I love his book, The Brothers. I love his book, Poisoner in Chief. I don't like the idea that he seems to carry that we are all as a nation, responsible for all of this horror. I don't like that idea. I like to say, well, no, that wasn't me. That wasn't my country that did these horrible things. But there's a whole debate there, and I probably, at the end would probably well concede, yeah, I guess we are all responsible, but we
Yeah. It's a hard debate. I mean, these characters, I'm interested in them, obviously, because they were the president or the secretary of the Navy. And um, with Roosevelt, I think I always try to look at the history of inventions and war material and things like that, and that was a big driver, I think, of events that um, like the idea of going from the age of sail to the Ironsides, and then having torpedoes, which Teddy Roosevelt, I think, specifically was very involved in the initial negotiations of torpedoes. And with as far as the conquests and in the Far East, uh, it's the same characters over and over again. And you talk about that the banking panic of 1907, and one of the things that I think people need to remember is that we didn't have a federal income tax at that point. So the taxes were raised through tariffs and poll taxes at that point. The big bankers, like you referred to, J.P. Morgan, was, they were starting to do their sort of Jekyll Island planning. And, so for me, I like to look at, who are those bankers, how they change over time. J.P. Morgan's very famous. One concept that I think really helped me is the idea of using competing banks against each other to create you talked about before about having the oligarchs and which oligarchs you cheer for. And it seems like, historically I feel like the hand behind them. I mean, we talked about Adam Smith and the hidden hand in economics and that concept. J.P. Morgan sort of had the reputation of being the white shoe, blue blood, waspy bank of Wall Street. Deeply partnered with London through Peabody. And then they always would have like a Jewish bank as sort of their foil. And Kuhn and Loeb was sort of the Jewish bank, and that was Jacob Schiff and Warburgs and Otto Kahn, guys like that were really, the leaders in doing a lot of these big projects, like, for example, like a transcontinental railroad, or doing canals or bridges, big projects, things that would be, debated over whether those should be state projects or federal projects, how to pay for them. Those are all things that were part of the discussion, not just, I do think that the Federal Reserve Act and the idea of using inflation to refer to as sort of the stealth tax, where people don't notice that the value of their assets are diminishing over time. I do think that is a great trick in economics, but there are super projects that are also something to consider as far as when you're analyzing the history of the financial system.
Like what?
Well, the one I'm thinking about right now that is, like, for example, like the Hoover Dam, or like Tennessee Valley. And like, I know you've spoken about how your family specifically, lost their land and was, taken by eminent domain for the Tennessee Valley Authority. And the Hoover Dam was built by a consortium of 6 companies, and those 6 companies are like the Bechtel and Henry Kaiser, the Utah Construction Company, and the same companies that do like war material for World War II are the same companies that were doing the original like steamships and railroads and things like that. So I think that just like, I always try to organize things in a way that they're easier to sort and think about. And so like, I think of logistics systems and moving material and, mining, and just, agriculture obviously being a key also, but how do you bring it to market and process it, things like that.
Mining is something I never thought much at all about, but every time we turn around, we see the from history that mining has driven an awful lot of exploration, especially right here in the East Coast, where whether it was gold or even just iron, if they could find it, they could make something with it, and that was very, very valuable. Even if it was just some raw iron, they knew how to make things with that. And that, it's maybe largely ignored in history books, how finding minerals, finding iron, finding precious gold minerals, all of that stuff was a huge driver of the expansion. And so that's something that I guess you as somebody who's studied business is much more acutely aware of than rest of us.
Well, one of the other things that I like to try to remember is that the Department of War and the Navy Department had a really big hand in leading those projects, and that was something that, you know, we were talking. The video you sent was talking basically about Teddy Roosevelt and his role historically with the lodges. Being his closest friend was Henry Cabot Lodge. The other character that is really important is Elihu Root. He was his Secretary of War in, I think, 1901 to 1905. And when you talk about these foundations and using the Carnegie Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation, he was the lawyer that really did a lot of the led those projects, and he was also a big contributor to the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations, which my theory has been that the East India Company was collapsed at World War I in name, and then rebranded as the Chatham House and the Council on Foreign Relations. And so rather than using a trade company as because colonizing was sort of the idea, was getting away from having monarchies and having colonization in World War I, they just sort of rebranded it as foundations, and then using sort of think tanks or NGOs. And the whole idea of like the Milner's round table, and then the Oxford Scholars and sort of those groups, I think came out of that same era with Root being a big driver of that policy.
Well, the other big point that comes from what Kinzer was saying in that interview, which was on CNN, by the way, it's a 2019 interview with Stephen Kinzer, was that this incident of him using tax money to bail out the banks was the beginning of Too Big to Fail.
Mm-hmm.
And that resonates strongly with me, because I see that once they got started, just like anytime there's emergency powers, right? Oh, there's a bank panic, we've got to have an emergency power to do something special, so let's okay, we'll give $25 million to JP Morgan, and we'll be good. Okay, everybody fine, we'll just paper it over, don't talk about it a lot, it'll be fine. And then the next time somebody conceives of a emergency that might just sort of kind of happen, like something maybe blowing up in Havana Harbor, like a big ship or something.
Right.
And then oops, black swan event, and those that were lucky enough to anticipate it would do pretty good. This expansion of the president's power in particular to to dole out money like that is it was just it was maybe necessary at the time. This reminds me of Lincoln saying, if I have to break one law in order to save the nation, what's better, to save the law and lose the nation, or to break the law and save the nation? You get to that point, as a president, you're always pushed into that point. The people are always saying to you, it's emergency, emergency, emergency. And we've certainly had that going on right now. No wonder Joe Biden looks exhausted and confused.
Yeah. And I hate to say it, but Kerry looks so exhausted too. The last time I saw him speak, he really looks ragged.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, what what
Well,
is what is behind Elon Musk? Is
well,
he a self-made person? I did see an article about his his grandfather being involved in something like the technological. what do you call it when the technological totalitarians? It's like the
Oh, yeah,
technology is
yeah,
going to rule everything. Uh, that
I-
whole idea is some science fiction kind of idea.
yeah. I read that as just being the Canadian DARPA. I mean, his background is he's either from South Africa or one of the South African countries. So he has a background that I think you could probably pretty easily link to the Anglo-American and De Beers syndicate. Um, he's I'm somebody that has I've always, as you said, I've always been really interested in the stock markets and sort of learning about these celebrity CEOs or industrialists, and their backstories are and again, that's what why I love Mark Kulak's program so much, because he gets into the history of where the characters come from, and and sadly, they're constructs. They're taking oftentimes military intellectual property, things that are developed through the military under security clearances. We've talked a lot about the Manhattan Project and how that was sort of has been rebranded, and they put a lot of sort of a lot of the technologies and sort of industry secrets or recipes for different like metals or plastics or drugs, things like that, which may have been developed in Germany or other old British empires, and then they sort of will put them in, like, for example, like a Dawes plan or a Young plan, where they'll take the IG Farben assets and then sort of rebrand them as like RCA, and then they'll create like a DARPA or a Sarnoff created his laboratory that then becomes the Stanford Research Institute, and then they'll have all these young tech kids that will take these Stanford research projects, and then they'll come out as these sort of boy geniuses. And I think of like my own grandfather, who I think he was an electrical and mechanical engineer. He went to Purdue in West Lafayette, Indiana, which is it's, people think of Indiana as being sort of a Midwestern farm area, but there's a lot of aerospace history there. And his the director of his engineering program was a man named Abraham Potter, who was from St. Petersburg, Russia, who brought rocketry program. They had aerospace there. So I think about him, and he was somebody that really was quiet and didn't really talk about what he did. But the idea of some 18, 19-year-old kid just thinking of some idea and not having gone through years of understanding how to build things and make the build them from the ground up or build off of the work of other people before you, I think is a flawed idea. I think it's very easy to prove it again. I think Mark Kulak has done a really good job of exposing that and showing how it is teams of a lot of times paperclip people. I mean, that was a big program where they don't want to say where they got the ideas from, so they come up with the again, programmed through these sort of ideas of science fiction books, where you have some people that are just super geniuses that no one else can understand the way their mind works. So I think Elon is right in there with that type of an idea.
What about the idea of putting chips in our brains? That comes from him, right? And the Neuralink. Have you studied the Neuralink
I
project?
Mostly, like, I remember they had the monkey playing a video game and like controlling the controller. um it just makes me think of the a lot of the medical experimentations. I mean, I was a kid that was horrified by the right stuff with Matthew Broderick when the monkey had to go up in the rocket and all that stuff. Like I always liked the animals, but I know that historically we've used animals for experimentation and not just the idea of using like a computer chip or like a electronic device, which I think is part of it. But sadly, I do think that the idea of Professor Hamamoto has talked about how we're in the era of understanding the brain, and they sell it as using this technology to cure disease and help people, but when you study the history of the stuff, it's very off-putting to me.
I'm afraid I was watching one of the most off-putting ones I've ever seen today on Twitter. It was actually an Odyssey production by somebody from DARPA. The date was 2017, and he was basically giving a sales pitch about what they could do with these nanoparticles that they can, that are just invisible, and they can get them inside of you, and it just they can cause you to have a stroke,
Yeah.
years from now. Just selling this horrible biowarfare stuff. We can do short term, we can do long term. We can. I mean, it's like a sales pitch, but it's also like a football coach getting the team ready. Like, we're going to do this, and we're going to do
Yeah.
this, we're going to do this, and I'm like horrified that and you're exactly right. I mean, it's all being sold. It's been sold all along as good medicine. As the American Medical Association has done a great job of covering up a lot of what's really going on with medical experimentation. And the military side of it. My goodness, I don't want to think about it.
Well, it's like anything. I mean, if the people that were if the bankers were trustworthy, the idea of having a one world currency is a really good idea. It makes transactions easy. Um, you don't have to worry about exchange, things like that. So in the right setting, it could be a really good program. But the problem is that their track record is that they use it to as a mechanism of enforcement. And that's the problem, is that I don't think they've earned the trust to sell these programs. I think that people should be skeptical of them, but there's goods and bads of all of them, and so that's the part that's hard about it, because they can sell it, and then you'll get people that will look at the positive parts of it and sort of ignore the potential risks, and it just creates a lot of fear, I feel like, amongst the population.
Yeah, and that we've talked about that fear and the perpetuation of it with great, and also the ability of them to just kind of change everybody's attention from one thing to another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm still I'm still haven't figured out whether Putin is on the side of liberty and freedom, or whether he's still in bed with Henry Kissinger,
Yeah.
or I'm pretty baffled about it. What are you following? I guess the reporting on the Ukraine war, and
Now, I watch what George, George is close to it, and I feel like his analysis is the best of anybody. So, um, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of Putin. I look at I look at his oligarchs and their history, as far as the collapse of the Soviet Union economically, and who went in there to sort of bail them out and rebuild them up. And you know, it's something that I always I look at, like the Rosneft and the Gazprom, these Nord Stream, the companies that we hear about, but I've never heard anybody ever say how is Gerhard Schroeder the chairman of all three of these? He's a former German prime minister. So that'd be like Bill Clinton being the head of the Canadian oil and gas national company. Like, how is that not talked about? I mean, I feel like it's it's just an unusual thing to be selling this, the strongman, Russian uh, going in and taking territory, but not talking about how a lot of these oligarchs have these very blended histories with the Ukraine and with Russia, and also with just the classic old British Petroleum and Royal Dutch Shell. It just seems like they all seem to have their roots in the old, going back to World War I and the Bolshevik Revolution. That's something I really look at, is the whole Bronnable, which was the noble family, which is a Swedish oligarchs, and they were business partners with the French and the English Rothschild families. And then you had Walter Teagle, who was a guy from Cleveland that was the chairman of Standard Oil of New Jersey, which is now called Exxon. So when you have Trump, creating a Secretary of State named Rex Tillerson, who is the chairman of Exxon, it seems like it's the same guys. I mean, the Jacob Rothschild ended up with the majority of the shares of Yukos, which has now been rebranded as Rosneft. So it seems like you have the same Rockefeller, Rothschild, Noble, British Petroleum, Royal Dutch Shell is the Samuel family, which is supposed to just be a, extension of the old, banking system, Makata or Rothschild, whatever you want to call it. It just seems like it's all the same characters. So I don't know. I mean, I'm somebody that I don't watch, the Russian foreign ministers other than what George presents, but to me it does seem like it's we talk about Teddy Roosevelt and his sort of colonization, and then the idea of going to World War I and how we were going to be isolationist, and then we became, then we get sort of dragged into it, and then Churchill sort of dragging us into World War II. It just seems like the same sort of concepts that just keep repeating.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. I feel we are being dragged into World War III,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got troops right up on the border, and as as Harley Schlanger was saying yesterday, apparently Poland is all in for whatever NATO wants to do, and I was shocked to see Sweden and Finland say they're going to join NATO. It does look like they got strong armed into it, but hey, I've never really had a clear understanding of what Carl Bildt's role might be in all of this, because he emphasizes, and if you think about it, the colors blue and yellow, Sweden and
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine, and he talks about Ukraine a lot. And maybe a couple of years ago, when I was first exploring it and learned about the history of the area called the Pale, and
Mm-hmm.
how that area, which was where Catherine the Great allowed Jewish settlements to occur, coincides with the kingdoms of Lithuania slash Poland, like slash Ukraine. All of them have been connected, and Sweden kind of got a real behind the scenes interest in the outcome of this thing here. I think they do.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the Noble family going back to 1880s or 1890s, when they're signing deals to do with Rudolf Diesel to create the first pipelines and the first, diesel refineries. The other family that I think is really important is the Wallenberg family. I talked about the Raoul Wallenberg, who went to the University of Michigan and was an architectural student at U of M, and then he became one of the great people helping the Jews, flee out of Hungary, escaping. And so you have one nephew who's trying to liberate, people from concentration camps, and then you have his uncle who's running basically their national bank that's, doing deals with the Nazis, and also acquiring Hambro, and Charles Hambro then becoming the head of the SOE, the British, basically their economic warfare department.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You just told me something I never thought of. That Wallenberg was
They acquired Hambro Bank.
acquired the Hambro Bank, and
Charles Hambro
of
becomes the
course,
SOE.
after Wallenberg acquires the bank,
I
then
think acquired them in the 20s.
uh-huh. Well, that's fascinating because, of course, from the SOE, you have that whole split between MI5 and MI6, and the willingness to go way outside the bounds of what the law is, or what the Parliament has said, or what the people of Great Britain think you're doing. This whole secret, sneaky stuff comes in that way. And it's so interesting that you can tie that back to Wallenberg. I never thought of that.
Well, the other thing about the SOE was that their nickname was the Baker Street Irregulars and Churchill's Private Army. And they also become the group that goes to the Rockefeller Center and becomes the BSC. And that's run by William Stevenson and William Donovan and Allen Dulles. So, that's another. They basically moved their franchise to New York City. And the other character that I think is really important is a guy named William Wiseman. And he was somebody that worked with Colonel House during the World War One. He was sort of the main spy for the Kuhn and Loeb Bank, which, was one of the banks that I talked about earlier. That was sort of the one half of the J.P. Morgan and then the Kuhn and Loeb group. He becomes the mentor of William Stevenson, but also somebody from here named Max Fisher, who's originally from Pittsburgh and then becomes a very big Detroit. He's somebody that's he was one of the top philanthropists. He was very involved in Jewish appeal and helping Israel and things like that. I mean, he lived in Franklin, Michigan. So, there's a very strong connection. That's like why when that guy came to my house or whatever, and I knew he was, associated with Max Fisher has passed away now, but that's why I sort of freak out when there's somebody like a Nathan Wolfe that's from West Bloomfield, Michigan, because there's a lot of characters local that I feel like are just the contemporary versions of that network. And Fisher was somebody that was very close with a man named Alfred Taubman, who had had the largest commercial mall space real estate company, who was the mentor of Les Wexner, who had the retail businesses. So that stuff really it hits home. And then you also have the Paul Whelan angle, who's from Novi, Michigan, which is right next to Farmington Hills, where we've talked about the Ritchie boys before and their role as far as they were part of what was called the CIC. Is that right?
Right.
They were the Army's intelligence unit, and they
Counterintelligence Corps.
Counterintelligence Corps, and that was a group again that's confusing because they're very linked to the Frank Wisner and the Gellin organization. They had
and Kissinger, right?
And Kissinger, absolutely.
Yeah.
And was the translator of Allen Dulles. So when you talk about Dulles going to New York and working for the SOE, or the British Security Coordination, in the Rockefeller Center, Dulles, his translator was Kissinger, as a young man. And, Kissinger, we know, was at Camp King in Germany, where Galen went, after he sort of did his deal that, you've talked about, his Fort Hunt agreement. He then ran his intelligence unit, which was basically the CIA's European, wing.
Yeah. But secretly, basically working for Dulles still.
With
And
a lot of Frank Wisner in there too. Wisner was supposedly somebody that really worked with Otto Skorzeny and this Otto von Bolschwing, who was somebody that went to the West Coast to San Francisco.
mm-hmm.
But Wisner, he was his J. Edgar Hoover called Wisner, the Georgetown Sec Group, the Wisner's weirdos, and they were very social with the a lot of the old OSS people in that group. But he then, his son ties in now, Frank Wisner Jr. I mean, he's somebody that's been a lawyer for AIG, which we've talked about with the whole Chiang Kai-shek and that Flying Tigers group. And then with he's also with the International House, which is something that was I think a less thought of Rockefeller foundation. Basically it's from my understanding, it's associated with universities and provides scholarships and housings for foreign students. And we talk about George Soros a lot, but his brother and Daisy Soros, they were very big in the I House. So I don't know. It's that, I'm trying to tie it all together to make sense of it. But of course, it's like so depressing, because then you get into, our current Secretary of State, who's, our top statesman right now. And he's somebody that was a student under Donald Barr. His real father was one of the founders of Warburg Pincus, and then started the Blinken Open Society Library in Hungary, which was started by George Soros. And then his stepfather was Samuel Pisar, who was, again, like a Max Fisher, somebody that was a confidant and advisor to, I think, 6 or 7 presidents, and was the lawyer for Robert Maxwell. So it's just like, it just seems to me like the old SOE group is still just running the show, or at least, doing a lot of the policy.
Yeah, and it is chilling, and you've put it together really well. This work that we've done, all of us have really unmasked this great connection between all of these characters, and it's certainly not just the British. I think we've also, discovered an awful lot of underhanded activity from other European forces.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think it's fair to say that because they are both elite-driven entities, looking at the British and then as Europe, as much as I can, Southern Europe in particular, that they have different ideas about how they run the empire, but they both are empires, and therefore they work together whenever they have to achieve something that they need, such as our money, and
Mm-hmm.
and they work together to keep each other, like a kind of like a central bank would, or like a reinsurance company would make sure that all the insurance companies got money, like we were talking about with Roosevelt handing out, millions of dollars of real money back then, by the way, to all those banks. But it's it's wrong in terms of the American way. It's wrong in terms of what our founding fathers wanted, and it's just wrong in so many ways that we have gone down this road. And the way this road ends is pretty clear. It's going to be either fascism or Nazism or some other form of nightmare, like Orwell's and Huxley's writings have predicted, with the total loss of our individual rights. And so, what can we do other than to just keep talking about it? That's that's my plan. Is that I'm gonna change my name. I'm gonna change my name to John Individual Rights O'Loughlin. How does that
I,
sound?
I'm with you. I mean, again, it's hard because I like I said, a lot of these characters are people that or at least their families, are people that I've met personally, and it doesn't seem like that. That's the drive. I mean, the families seem like they care about their kids and they want the best for their families, and so it's hard. I mean, I don't know, like, again, like with the whole overall plan. I mean, I think you're right that it's empires, and they've gone to great lengths, I feel like, to try to hide the fact that that's what it really is about. Empires are having like big transnational domination, like in British East India Company. um but as far as what to do, I just hope that the people, because like I said, people I know I think are not, you know don't think like that. I mean, the school that I went to specifically was very much like a Milner's kindergarten or a Kissinger's kindergarten. I mean, it was like the school your father went to. It was full of really bright, very diverse kids. Like when George talks about like an Imran Awan, well, I probably went to school with his relatives, because there were a lot of Indian and Pakistani and kids from Asia all over that were so smart. I mean, unbelievable. So I just hope that will people will do what they can to try to not go through with it. I mean, again, it's like, I don't know. I'm always I feel like a lot of people want to look at like Masons or various sort of secret societies, and I do think that's part of it. But again, it's just like, I don't know what to do. I mean, it seems like the top officials in every area are not on board with the ideas of individual rights.
That's because they've been placed there by the powers behind them, and this is the only suggestion that makes sense to me is to keep pressing on the Kennedy assassination. Because the people that are dominating us now are the successors in interest to the people that killed President Kennedy. And I think once everybody sees that and understands that, then we can look at it the way I try to suggest to people to look at it like this. It wasn't just an assassination, it was a coup.
Hmm.
It was the end of the republic that we knew as of that time. And
Right.
now, although we still have the paperwork, we still have the structures, we still have the institutions, the actual power has shifted out of the old republic and into the hands of the people that ran the coup. So if we can solve the Kennedy murder, then we can see who ran the coup, and then we can head back to our roots and get back to being the republic that we're supposed to be. A big job that'll probably take generations, but that's the only thing I can offer, is to let's get back on the Kennedy thing and not let go of it.
Well, I think there's a lot of really good material. It's hard. I mean, I feel like it's hard that it's not taught. People don't have that background. But you know, even talking to my own family, like, they don't have a concept that we were, the CIA was partnered with the other European countries doing overthrows in places like Egypt and Iran, Guatemala, you know,
France.
France. We talked about um, the Philippines, or Hawaii even. Um, they don't. I don't know. The power of the American dream and that American, the American guy, the Americans are the good guys always, and we're going around and stopping the bad guys is very powerful branding. And of course, most people that are, you know, have sort of a beta personality type where they want to be on the right team or cheer for the winner. I think a lot of them feel like they are. And so it's hard to convince them that, there's a lot of bad historical bad behavior and current, up to the minute, sadly, that, I do think the Kennedy is very important because, you can look at the executive action groups and, these groups that were um, teams that were going around and sort of orchestrating these coups.
Hmm. Yeah, and then there's the long-term programs, the deeply disturbing long-term psychological warfare against the people, and the the war against our institutions, and just dividing us up, and all of these things have had their effect, but even more chilling right now is the horrible effect of opiate poisoning that our country is being subjected to. I interviewed Chris Milligan, the great publisher at Trying Day Books, a couple of years ago, and he told me about his dad had been in, I think it was CIA in the 50s, and he told his son, he said, the plan is that they're going to destroy America by getting us hooked on opiates. And I, I see it happening, and it's so tragic and avoidable, and uh, just another sign that the there is a conspiracy.
Yeah.
There is, God damn it, there's a conspiracy going on, and we've got to bust them on it. And I don't know what else to say except for tell your people, don't mess with that stuff. It wants to kill you, and it will.
Yeah. Well, again, we have the opium wars, and, people want to, depending on what you watch, people want to just blame China for a lot of problems. And, China endured opium wars, and it's not a new strategy as far as, and sadly, they've been able to, you know, chemically alter things and fine tune them over years. And it's a very scary, it's very scary. I don't know. I mean, it's I we talk about the United Fruit Company and how they became a big player as far as the drugs in America. And it's sadly these are they are the same groups. I mean, we started off saying we wanted to talk about Roosevelt and uh, Henry Cabot Lodge, and they were both, they're both the Delano and Roosevelt and Lodge families. They were old, opium Brahmin and United Fruit shareholders. So it's, hopefully,
And let's not omit the fact that they were also racists.
yeah,
They were just they were as racist as you could imagine, and that's part of it too, because the old idea of, well, we can sell it to them, we'll sell it to those other people,
right,
it won't infect our community. And that was probably true for most people that were involved in free trade, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, yeah, it's yeah. I even I don't know, like just there's a lot of, like I said, I mean, my personal experience is that I had a very diverse school, and I felt like people were, the best of the best of wherever people came from, and um, but sadly, even just like reading about, somebody that was a neighbor of my dad's friend that owned the Detroit Tigers, he was very famous for not, signing black players and things like that. So there is a history of this kind of, you talked about the quarterbacks or whatever. I mean, those kind of ideas, have been around, and it's, I don't know what to do as far besides, just trying to understand the roots of it and explain it, and hopefully, hopefully we can stop it, because it's, it does affect, affects, a lot of, and I don't think there's anybody that avoids it at this point.
Well, I've been thinking about it a lot. My feeling is that the awakening has to be an awakening of the real true scope of the planet, of the world, of how incredibly huge it is, of how incredible much land there is, how incredible much water there is, how much variety there is everywhere, and the lack of any need for scarcity anymore. Because between the resources that are here and the technologies that we have developed to now, well, the ones that we know about and the ones that the CIA keeps in their secret bunkers, but all of the technology put together, whether it's peaceful nuclear reactors or some kind of electronic transmission that's incredibly cheap or free, that all of these problems can be solved. It's just a matter of engineering and a matter of peace, a matter of just stop believing in the scarcity model. And how do we do that? By overcoming the tribal or clannish or nationalist or whatever feelings that we have based upon the scarcity model. Because if there wasn't scarcity, then we wouldn't have to organize ourselves into warrior parties and go out and raid the other guys. And there's no need for scarcity anymore. It's just the planet is extremely rich, and could supply many more people than we have right now. And as far as population is concerned, well, for goodness sakes, whatever happened to our dreams to go and populate the solar system and the universe? Let's get back to that. All of that can be done if people will stop looking at things from a scarcity model. And how do we do that? We have to convince everybody that, hey, you know what, Teddy Roosevelt, he was probably a really, really great president, but he was operating under a very, very false assumption that a lot of people operated under then, and that was that one race was better than another. And now we know that that's not true. So let's all of us stop acting as if that were true. And I don't know. Excuse me. I worry about this so much
Yeah.
that I keep trying to figure out some way to just, get up on a soapbox and say, hey guys, this is what we got to do. And
Yeah.
that's my offering for tonight.
Okay. Well, it's, we've talked a lot about economics and Adam Smith and the hidden hand, and sadly, I think that controlling supply and demand, and sort of, controlling prices is a big part of it, and that's, sadly, how they've made a lot of money and gotten a lot of control over, busting their opponents or putting pressure on people. And it's part of the control system. And I don't know. I agree. I mean, I think that, like, I mean, I think of things as, watching the old video of the miracle of the can and how a can was going to make it so you didn't have to rely on the growing seasons anymore, and that everybody would have plenty of food and it could be stored. And it's like, what happened to the can? It seems like we're talking about um, food shocks and things like that. And it's like, well, I thought we solved that with the can.
I hadn't heard the miracle of the can story before. You
American
got
Can Company. It talks about the double sealed can so you could store food for years, and there was a lot of spoilage and sickness from people eating foods that would
oh yeah.
spoil, a lot of spoilage, and it was supposed to be that you were able to you know store food and solve world hunger.
Yeah, whatever happened to the can?
Bring back the can.
Bring back the can.
Hmm.
All right. Well, that's one of many, many great ideas we've tossed around tonight. And it's been a great pleasure, David. Thank you so much. And thanks, everybody, for being with us. Now, tomorrow morning at 11, I will have a special show with David Shaven of the LaRouche organization. He'll be talking about Schiller, Friedrich Schiller, the author of the Ode to Joy lyrics, and a playwright, a person whose uh, philosophy is very dear to the LaRouche and Schiller people, of course, Schiller Institute named after him, and what Schiller's thoughts can do to help us get out of this mess. I think it'll be very, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to that. Well, all right, David, thanks again. And tomorrow night, the great Professor Hamamoto right here at 8 p.m. So I know
And
we'll see you all there.
um,
Pardon me?
I get to be on with Professor Humo at 6 tomorrow, so we're going to talk about Detroit and Robin Williams. And also for your interview tomorrow, I hope that you name drop my mom's neighbor, Willie Apple, and his wife, Ursula. Her grandfather was, I forget his first name. His last name was Simmering, but he was a sculptor, and he did the Handel, Mozart, and Beethoven sculpture in Berlin. And I'm sure the Schiller people would know that family because Willie Apple, of course, was the great musicologist, and that was they lived right behind my mom growing up. Actually, Miss Dr. Apple lived in their home for a year, so that's something that I always, whenever I hear the people talking about the old music, I'm always very interested in that.
All right. Well, I was Willie Apple, right? Apple.
Yeah, he wrote the like the history of keyboard theory and the plain chant and the encyclopedia of music when he was at Harvard.
All right. Very, very interesting. I hope you can join us in the chat tomorrow.
I will.
Excellent. All right, everybody. Thanks again. We will see you tomorrow.